Hi, thanks so much for coming, everybody. It's true, organized this panel, and I invited these speakers, Monica Arés, the Director of Content Transformation at Microsoft, Will Cherry, Meta Reality Labs technical artist, Paige Dansinger, the founder of the Better World Museum, and Eugy Han, graduate research fellow, now with a PhD, at Virtual Human Interaction Lab. At Stanford University. And so I invited them to share their knowledge, experiences, and goals, really, about the AI NPCs that they've been working with, because I'm curious about the future, where I'll be interacting with them, most likely on a regular basis. And I wanted to know how that might change my behavior, in fact, how that might change all of our behaviors. You know, we constantly hear about the advantages that AI will bring, just to name a couple. You know, in education, for example, AI-driven personal tutors, Khan Academy, Victory XR, for example. In healthcare, creating new medicines, in modeling disaster scenarios and solving problems like improved carbon capture to help us save the environment. But at the same time, as Yuval Harari has pointed out, we are creating AI agents that are more than tools. Until now, all the technology we've ever invented has been, we've invented them and we've directed them. But with AI agents, they will be inventing and they will be soon directing themselves. And so what we are, well, you know, we're developing godlike technologies, as E.O. Wilson would say. And so, just to continue with E.O. Wilson for a moment, how do we overcome our Paleolithic emotions and our medieval institutions to coexist with and thrive with AI? I wanted to share my doubts and to learn how realistic my doubts are, and to talk about solutions. Today, that's what we're here to do. We're going to talk about solutions, because we want you to walk away thinking about how AI can help us collaborate to create a better future, to inspire people to do things, and for all of you to be inspired to do things with AI, because after all, you are the change makers. So I thought, since I've explained why I wanted to organize this, that I would ask each of the panelists to talk briefly about their concerns and what excites them about AI. And I think we'll just go around. So maybe Monica, would you start for us?
Happy to start. I'm happy to be here with everyone too. I came to this space really to transform learning. And I love that we finally have the tools that can combine human intellect and technology in a way that should allow learning to become a natural extension of ourselves. And so AI and XR can not only understand, but respond to things like our gestures, our gaze, our voice, and our natural language. And so when you think about what that can do for learning, it means we can kind of move away from this system of just content delivery and memorization and really help with unlocking curiosity, creativity, and connection at scale. This is something we've been longing for in the industry for a long time. We just never really had the tools to do it. And so we're moving from a place where we're not just going to change learning, but I think we're going to fundamentally change our relationship with intelligence itself, because we can move away from these static systems to one that's more like a continuous co-intelligence. One where, as we start to interact with these systems more and more, both the system and the human are going to evolve together. And so if we do it right, I think we're not just going to build better learning tools, but I think we're actually going to start to partner with our evolution together on this. So very excited to be here and excited for the conversation we're going to have.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, Will, you're up.
Okay. Whoa. All right. Hi, I'm Will. My last name's a fruit. The things that I am most excited about with AI actually involve growth. It is really similar to learning in that a lot of times some of our first VR experiences change us and who we are, how we perceive the world, how we perceive others. And AI is one of those things that through NPCs, we can simulate certain scenarios to help us learn to be better people. So I come from this realm of working with immersive theater, working with performers, with actors who create magical experiences that only humans can do. And that's really, really hard to pull off in the current system that we have that involves animation state machines and models and textures and a whole lot of extra stuff that is difficult to recreate. But I do think that with AI added to those features to drive those state machines, to come up with new states, we'll actually have characters that evolve with us and help us grow, help us be better. And they can stay confined to their own worlds, or they can pass through worlds. I have a lot of reservations about this. I have many, many concerns that I'm sure other people share about how far that overreach is. But I do think that if we keep them within a particular set of confinement now and then have them grow and develop as we grow and develop, a lot of those barriers will be crossed in the right way. But that starts now.
I like that.
Thanks.
Want to switch this?
Got you.
Okay. So Eugy, let's hear from your perspective.
I come from a more perception and action background. So in the past, I've studied a lot of different environments and their properties and how they can influence people, but also the communication process. And inherently part of the environments that we are in, and just to provide a bit more context, we try to understand the human mind or how people exist. The environment is an inherent property of that, right? Because we always exist in some type of environment, similar to how we're in a conference room right now. It would be very different if we were, say, on the beach, which is literally just outside the door, but this conversation would be very different if we were surrounded by very different environmental properties. So I kind of focus on understanding how these properties influence the communication process, specifically looking at the social outcomes. Mainly because as human beings, we seek social interactions. We're always around people, and people make up or turn spaces into places by adding memories and more context to these environmental properties. So inevitably, as we move forward to understand how these environments shape the communication process, AI has been a very obvious sort of next step, whatever that looks like. So that's sort of where my perspective is coming from, more from an environmental aspect.
Thanks.
Yeah.
And Paige?
Oh, thank you. Okay, hard to beat what has already been mentioned, but one of the themes that I am here for, that I've heard some of my co-panelists talk about, is becoming your strongest, most empowered, most brilliant self, right? And what does that potentially look like with the companionship, not even the assistance, but like the hand-holding, embedded relationship together with AI, and how AI is able to be that partner in helping humans realize their highest potential selves, especially when it comes to making a better world, being better listeners, having more empathy, love, and compassion and inclusion together. When we are facilitating each other's best selves using many technologies, and in this case, NPCs and AI-driven models, that there are no more boundaries, that there are only possibilities. And that's what brings me here, because I truly believe, and maybe it's naive, or some may have said a cliche, but I truly believe that when we use these tools, especially together, we're making a better world, and we each have a story and a part of this. So my interest is not in me and what I create in my little vacuum. It's making sure when you leave here today, you know that the tools in your hands, your pockets, your headsets are agents of change, and that your voice, your group, your community has an important part of that. So thank you for being here.
I think that all of these things are possible. The co-creation, the co-thinking with AI, the building, of NPCs that can help us be better in environments that make us feel brave and safe, and allow us to work with communities to improve and to make change happen in a positive way. But I think what is fundamental there is that we trust the people, the NPCs, we trust humans, but that we learn to trust the NPCs and that we trust the environment that we're in so that we don't feel like we're manipulated, right? And we don't feel like we're being pushed in one direction or another by the bias of some large language model that hasn't been revealed to us, and we don't know really what the source is of the information that we're being fed or that we're being invited to interact with, right? So, you know, there are two main components to these environments. One is the environment itself, one is the NPCs that will populate it. And so, you know, Eugy, I think what I'd like you to talk about a little bit is, you know, what is the role of spatial design? How do we lay out, you know, the props and how does props and environmental storytelling shape social connection and especially emotional safety? Because we've talked a lot about emotions and being able to express them in these spaces.
Yeah, I don't know if it's working anymore. So as I mentioned before, as human beings, we always exist in an environment. And we look back years and years ago of why VR was used as a tool in a lot of psychological studies. It was done to replicate real worlds and understand and build environments very fast. Because, for example, if you want to test the role of ceiling heights, for example, manually raising ceiling heights would be a very expensive and very costly, but it has been done, but not often, as you might understand why. So a lot of the earlier works were sort of done to understand physical worlds and how people respond to them. But over time, as we've understood that VR is a unique medium of its own and people respond to VR slightly differently from how we respond to physical worlds, people have begun to experiment things a little differently. And it's mainly because the affordances that VR provides are very different from the ones that the physical world provides. So as this sort of has evolved, people have begun to understand VR as a medium itself. And the types of social interactions that these virtual environments can afford are also different. As you can probably see, we interact as avatars. There are different ways of communicating and interacting with the space around us. But as we move from sort of how does the space influence these types of interactions, we can also look at novel forms of interactions that might emerge. And a concrete example of that is the ability to world hop, for example. Sure, we can stay in one type of environment, but with the ease of these technological advances, we're also able to move to different environments. And that in itself is a very social activity. So if anyone has been in VR chat, for example, you might have used different portals to travel, and that in itself is a very social activity because you don't really do that just by yourself, but you do that with your friends. So that's an example of a social activity that emerges or a social practice that emerges as a unique function of virtual reality. But recently, as the conversation has been shifting more to AI and Gen AI, I've heard people sort of talk about, oh, we can empower people to create different unique worlds. It helps facilitate the building of worlds. But another thing it does is also helps personalize a lot of these worlds so that it's unique and tailored to each person. And by that, I mean, for example, if you think about TikTok or Instagram or any 2D media that you use, a lot of those platforms are the same in the sense that you use TikTok, your mom uses TikTok, your friend uses TikTok, but you have very different experiences on the platform because the For You page is tailored to your preferences. And the conversations that I've been hearing is that you can do the same thing for virtual worlds, in such that if you're having social interactions, not everything that I'm seeing has to be exactly the same thing as what you're seeing. So there's these frameworks called the Transformed Social Interaction Framework, which is that the virtual world does not have to be veridical, meaning it doesn't have to be a one-to-one mapping of the world. It doesn't have to be something that you expect to see in the physical world, but it's a transformation. And a lot of these things have trickle-down effects on the social interactions that occur, whether it's where you're looking at, how you're interacting with the people around you. And more concrete examples of that is, for example, when I'm talking to everyone here right now, I can transform my avatar in a way where I'm giving one-to-one eye contact to each person. I can inject behaviors that don't exist. So your experience of how you're experiencing this event would be very different from how another person is experiencing it. And that all goes to say that as these experiences can become more adapted and tailored to each individual and the social interactions, we can think about creative different ways to understand how environmental properties can be adapted to that person's preferences, similar to how a lot of these algorithms are adapted to your preferences. And I think as I was going around, I've seen already people being like, oh, like have your advertisements be tailored to this user, or have this content be tailored to this user. And that raises a lot of interesting questions about, okay, so if we're in this space and we're having these interactions, but you and I are seeing fundamentally different things, how does that impact our mutual sense of reality? And this has been long studied in the history of media. There are frameworks like what you see is what I see, asymmetric media, where these are often considered problems in a lot of media studies. Because if what I'm seeing is fundamentally different from what you're seeing, that might lead to issues.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for
Did you want to say
reasons.
something
Yeah.
about that?
Add on to that, this is a concept of, I think, some would call violations. If you have a person who walks into a McDonald's, bad example, but I know some of you laughed earlier, but it helps, who walk into McDonald's and try to do squats with weights, you're like, there's a violation of this space that we've agreed upon collectively, heuristically as humans. And in the similar vein, if you have an AI character that exists that is meant to be your friend that travels from world to world with you, and they're acknowledging other people that you're traveling with, but they're also their character. This is kind of a her problem for those who have watched the film. There are violations there of if I'm talking directly at one person and I am the AI agent, in virtual and augmented space, again, we can make these things asymmetrical. We could always make it so it's directed to whoever it needs to talk to, but there can be violations when two humans are talking to another and there's a third party. Who do you look at the third party if they're located in different spaces? And so there's considerations that have to be done. Again, this is farther out in the future than now, but things that have to be considered when we start to design these characters and we start to think about them and how they honor those spaces. And I feel like that's coming up more often as we build more virtual worlds or augmented spaces with rules that AI should inhabit by using contextual clues.
Well, what makes an NPC feel human to the rest of the humans in the space?
That's a heavy question.
I mean, in the learning space, what we're finding is, one, the data has to be good. Like, if you don't have enough foundational knowledge in there, there's a gap between users' interactivity and what they're getting out of it. So it has to at least feel as if the knowledge behind these avatars is sound enough that if you were speaking to a professor, another person of that industry, or someone who at least had equal curiosity, but it's actually the emotional layer on top of it that matters even more. And so, yeah, before our content really was kind of static and one directional. When we can infuse that with the humanness behind helping the learner understand how to become more curious, struggle with the learning, we don't want to take that away, it's such an important part, but help people develop the awareness, a little bit more of the confidence as they go through it, along with the communication skills and inquiry and innovation. It's when you bring all those things together, when a learner can feel three things from that experience, where they learn something, they feel something, it makes them smile, and they want to go tell somebody else about it. Those are typically the ingredients that we go for in sort of fusing together these knowledge bases that work well in communication or in instruction, but also that human side of learning that we can now add as that layer. So it's that whole combination that's starting to make people feel like they can trust the interactions that they're having in these virtual environments.
And also, I think that their expectations for what can happen in a space are met, at least initially, right? I mean, you may take them on a journey once they're there, but there needs to be a way to make people feel, oh, right, I'm in the right space, right? I'm, to feel welcome, for example. Do you want to, and I know that you've spent a lot of time designing spaces where you're using your NPCs to make people feel comfortable. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure, Robin, thank you. So in using NPCs and like AI-driven NPCs to make people feel more welcome in a space, that's a fun challenge for me. It's more than just creating a welcome traveler, you're in Garden Quest, and then share some like gameplay rules. It's sometimes sharing a message instinctually that you know the visitor, the player, the traveler, explorer will connect with, and define, like humans share messages all the time that humans don't listen to or don't care. You shouldn't smoke. Don't text while driving. Da 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 da. Care more about the oceans. Care more about climate. Eat healthier. We're barraged with goodwill suggestions all the time, whether it's in our home, on our phones, and media. But something happens, I believe, when, or at least this is something I'm testing, is that when an AI avatar shares a suggestion, I want to investigate if people will listen or act more. I have a suspicion that they would. So if an AI influencer, let's say a coral influencer, was welcoming people not just to learn more about the ocean, but engaging them to participate in creating part of the coral reef, not only are they going to, through their gameplay, like, be invested, but I believe they'll have longer retention, more meaningful connection, and take it further because of that AI-assisted NPC interaction. And more so, not that my voice isn't important or impactful or creates change, but more so potentially than my voice independently. I've been asking people to do X, Y, Z to make a better world forever, and yet look where we are, right? So, but if we had like an adorable cat right now, an AI NPC that was maybe our president, and they had adorable, cute, like cat ears and a little bow tie that they wore, I think that it could build a lot of trust, engagement, and create a whole new movement that was more inclusive, a more, instead of me, a we-focused future.
Can I expand on that at all? I'm curious.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I was just riffing, but I really believe this.
No, it's a great point. And you bring up a good thing about like cats or like I'm seeing a Mew sanctuary, like a Pokemon. Like humans attach ourselves to more abstract characters and shapes. We see ourselves in them more often. We're more likely to project ourselves onto them. And so that's why you see cartoons tend to be quicker to adopt for children, and then we find more adult shows later when we can kind of identify who we are. So when we build characters, we tend to build them in particular ways. I don't have a slide here, but I love it. This is an old reference. I like anecdotes. Maybe 2017, Google had a project called Arés, natural language processing, early AI stuff that would take in what you said and then took it as a command. But the character was a dog who's really not good at paying attention. This is a great design choice, knowing the limitations that you had, which said, I can say a thing, and if the NLP doesn't know what it is, if I don't know what the words are, the dog's like, I got nothing. I'll go do another thing. And so, but it knows the very easy words like stop, sit, stay, because they're easy to pick up, and we're more urgent on those. And so we can build out a character with much fewer set of data and all that jazz. It's much easier to work with because the confines of the proxy layer of us communicating with it are set. And as we've evolved since that time, we've found more characters that are more humanoid, more lifelike, but we lean on abstraction to help us embrace them better. If you had a pure, realistic-looking human in front of us that was emboldened with all the AI that we know and love on, I keep wanting to say natural language processing, on language models, and it asked you a question and you gave it a nonsensical answer, you would expect it to have a reaction to you that is very human, which is like, whoa, that's not right. And there's a little bit up there with Finn and Worlds, and I can get to him later, where there's a scrunch in the face, there's a reaction that's poor. And we're working on that to improve those things. I just think it's important to consider if you're going to build a character that embodies AI in some way, lean into your limitations and build a character around that. I'm going to go one more time on the last note here of Lucy that I mentioned from Wolves on the Walls. She's a little girl, and she's imagined you. And she didn't imagine you with a mouth, so you can't talk, which is really helpful because that removes a layer of abstraction. It removes the ability to communicate with her that way. So it's all through actions. There's context clues. I can come back to that later. But it's good to be aware of the fact that we built this character to be at your height, looking at you as an equal, taking you on an adventure and expecting things from you in a particular way. And we can start to build our AI characters kind of like from simplicity to more complex as we go. And that will give us more ease of trust in those systems.
There's also an interesting shift happening, though. Like in the same way that when we read books growing up, the characters were in our head. Like we created those characters, right? And so now that a lot of AI is actually done orally, like we are walking and talking to our AI. We're not always actually looking at something represented through the conversations that we're having. And so there's an interesting shift as well as, of course, we want to embody AI and they're in these physical worlds or these digital spaces, but what do those interactions start to look like in all of our own heads as we develop this trust, as we start to rely on it more and more? So I think that's an evolution that we're starting to see as well as people are using their glasses to just walk and talk to AI, as they're using the voice activation instead of reading a document or putting a headset on to be into that environment. So another space for imagination and AI, I think, to converge.
Just to quickly add to that, it seems like expectations is at the foundation of a lot of these things. And we see that in different concepts as well. For example, when we see an avatar that looks weirdly, eerily human, but is also really not, that's anthropomorphism, and at least Uncanny Valley, that's also because we have an expectation that it will behave a certain way, or it will look a certain way, and then it violates that, which is what makes us so uncomfortable. And you see that concept also translating to VR adoption as well. There's an expectation that we're going to have this experience, and if it's not met, or if it's more difficult than imagined and we have more cognitive load, it creates a negative experience. So I think meeting people at their height is a really big part of that expectation, and meeting or exceeding those expectations in negative positive ways.
I think you know this original study that humans are more outgoing, gregarious, and harder in negotiation when they believe themselves to be, this is important, whether or not they are, when they believe themselves to be taller than the person they're talking to. That's the magic that you mentioned about really
more
changing
attractive
skills.
too.
And more attractive. They believe themselves more attractive.
But even the confidence for learning in VR is huge. When you can decide what your avatar looks like and go into those experiences, completely changes the personality of a lot of learners, which is also interesting.
Yeah, that is really interesting. I mean, we haven't really talked much about the Proteus effect, but that is obviously an opportunity, I guess, to take advantage of in virtual spaces and immersive environments. What else makes people feel? I'm not sure. I mean, what else makes people feel confident, enough to, to be willing to explore new opportunities and learn things they might not have had an opportunity to learn, or maybe learn things they didn't even think they wanted to know, for example. You've both, you have some experience? All right.
I can't help but the first word that comes to mind is agency. Having their voice, their decisions, or having options within the experience that guide it and personalize it based on your own voice. I think agency is critical to creating, right? We go back to that brave, safe dichotomy of creating a brave space versus a safe space, right? And then you can feel safe in every space. But like having choice, agency, I think is a critical ingredient. So whether it's through gameplay, through being able to share your own narrative within the experience, or even to customize your AI avatar in the way that's best for you. I'm always like mirroring my avatar. I am me, my avatar, in so many embodied ways. But I felt really free once. I went on one of those world hops that Evo hosts of the transversal events, and we went into a new world, and I had the opportunity to be a slice of watermelon as my avatar, and I remember jumping and feeling so free and having like this really summery watermelon experience as this avatar, and I didn't realize that that was part of me. That was a part of me that I was missing and I didn't know that I needed. And so having these opportunities to shift your perspective, to be that partner with the AI, not have it help you, not go to it for your answers, but to have that relationship that also builds that agency. You're not having it do things for you, although sometimes I do use it in that way. I'm not gonna lie, but agency, start with that.
Can I leverage from
Build.
that? Sure. Part of it is agency, is giving people the option to have the ability to change state. I like using state machines a lot, you can tell. But when you involve an NPC in this, some of the most powerful NPC experiences that we've seen are ones that acknowledge that agency in that choice. Or if they can't even do that, they still have something that acknowledges the context of the scene. And 2 notes is, 1, if you're a watermelon and you bring up an AI agent, or you walk into an AI shopkeep, for example, having them acknowledge that that is who you are and that that is unusual for that space that they normally reside in makes us believe a lot more that this character exists in this space and that this is outside their norm. Whether or not that's true, AI is all about being conveniently lying, but
That's the issue.
I know I have a hot take, but I'll hold that for later. One of the other references that's not AI, because I like to look back at things that are not AI that worked just as well, that we can use to move forward. Legend of Zelda, Breath of the Wild. If it's raining, the character, before they talk to you, comments on the fact that, wow, you're out in the rain, that's weird. And then continues with what they were normally going to say. And you kind of ground them. You're like, wow, they believe they're here. I'm here with them. You don't need AI to do that, but you could really leverage it if you're in an AR or VR space where the conditions are different or the conditions are particular. And that is a very grounding point to conversation instead of going, hey, how can I help you? And you're like, ooh, that's out of left field. Not every human being you've talked to starts off with, how can I help you, unless you're on a call line.
Or in a department store, right?
That's true.
So yes. Well, we've talked a lot about, we haven't really talked so much about whether we're talking about multi-agent spaces or individual spaces, dealing with multiple humans. And Monica, you've had quite a bit of experience with that. So I was wondering, in shared AI experiences, what's it most important, do you think, to get right? To make people feel safe enough to become a watermelon if they want to be, you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, learning spans everything from sometimes you need time by yourself to just figure it out. Sometimes you want a mentor to bounce things off of, and sometimes you really need, it can be tribal. You want to have the power of the pack to help you. So trying to figure out all the different stages that we need to make sure that we've incorporated everything from like that professor in your pocket who at 4 a.m., if you're still working on something or had a question you were too embarrassed to ask in class, you can get that answer. You can brainstorm with it. That builds a lot of trust just in your own knowledge and sense making. But there are also times where it's like we wanted to create a sort of a pitch simulator. You can practice your part really, really well, but the reality is you're only going to win that pitch if you can actually convince the other humans in the room, oftentimes who are pretty challenging to work with and pitch to. And so we wanted to create situations where you could practice these real-world scenarios in a simulation, whether you practice nervous, whether you just need diversity of thought to help with innovation. And so being able to have different characters come into those spaces with you so that you can present what you wanted to and they ask you the questions you never thought to ask, or they give you guidance to move forward. We realized that having those kind of multi-agent scenarios are actually really important in helping develop the skills for the future, which again, if we're entering this sort of continuous, limitless intelligence, then what we really need to help prepare for is being adaptable. We need to help them with their problem-solving skills and definitely their communication. So having multiple agents in that room to help practice those scenarios and continue to push you forward and to think bigger is hugely important. So that's an area we're still working on. That one's harder to build than just the like, oh, here's your mentor that's permanently there, trained on one set of data, but having multiple different agents and perspectives come in has become hugely useful in how we really help prepare ourselves for those kind of scenarios moving forward. So, we're just sort of, again, trying to think through like where in your life, if you're going to go into sort of this continuous lifelong learning situation, what are the different pieces you need to be able to connect, and what are the different environments you need to be able to create in order to prepare yourself for all those different things. So it's a lot of the work we're doing.
Do you have a note on this one?
Oh, I just wanted to quickly add that about the lifelong learning thing, and also the safe and brave spaces. One thing I heard from while being in school is that you can't really learn in comfort. You have to be uncomfortable. And if you also think about it more from a social dimension, if anyone has like a tracker that tracks stress, you'll notice that your stress tends to go up when you're around other people. And typically, it might be because you're anxious, but it's because people are unpredictable, because you don't know how they'll act. And as a result, that state of being like, oh, what will they say next? What will they do next? Might increase your stress. And currently, a lot of the AI agents that we see tend to agree with what you're saying. They tend to be nice to you. They say, even if you might be very wrong, they'll say, great, this is like a great perspective. You're totally right. Or I don't know, sometimes they give it like very deliberately wrong things, and they're like, yes, you're the most right person in the world. But speaking of personalities and sort of crowdsourcing, we do need those different perspectives, and we do need that uncertainty of not knowing what they'll say and do to sort of be able to learn from that. We don't really need people that completely agree with you 100%.
This is also hugely important for a lot of our neurodivergent learners who often, like traditional learning environments, have not actually really helped them show their true superpowers and be able to succeed. And having environments where, again, like we have to build in emotional AI into these places and spaces somehow, that can help anyone, again, push harder, get a little bit more confident, go through that struggle, and continue to grow. So we don't want anything to just end with like, yeah, there's the answer. Like, no, I'm going to continuously be programmed and working with you to think bigger and push further. And having all those different connections for any kind of learner to be able to feel like they are getting challenged and that they are being listened to and evolving in a way that's going to help them learn best and perform best. But even in corporate settings, we're seeing this, helping people better communicate and better prepare for meetings. Anything where you would normally be nervous at, you can't really practice for until you're in the moment. I think a lot of this new technology is going to help us prepare for those a little bit better.
It's going to help us become more adaptable.
And more empathetic, right?
Yes.
I use AI all the time. I have an ADHD daughter, and in the beginning it was super frustrating because I couldn't understand how her brain was working or how it couldn't quite perform the way that she was expected to at school. And I created an agent with all the information I could find on ADHD and just asked, how do I help understand her brain? How do I connect with her? And that has completely changed my understanding and relationship with her and really allowed me to amplify what she's doing and support her. And it's been a huge shift. So it's like, imagine if, again, we can build the empathy and the awareness for everybody to start to connect and communicate better. I think it would be incredible.
I had thoughts on this, and you went around it in a cool way, and I'll come back, but nice. I know we talked about violations of spaces that heuristically you're aware of, like a boardroom, if you're trying to practice for a pitch, and you mentioned multiple personalities, AIs that are particular in how they react to you, that are not all, you go, man, you got this, the whole time. We don't grow from this. And I do think this stems from role play. This stems from ways that I think you can tell me more than I would know, but how humans learn from role play. Children will learn using the magic circle, using gameplay to establish how to go about these situations. And making multiple AI characters or multiple AI personalities that fulfill those roles is part of that process to learn, which is why I have to strive more and more to tell people you can't just slap ChatGPT onto a body. You have to give it something more that is unique to that world or that situation and can react to those things accordingly, or else the violation happens immediately. You know full well it's just putting a mask on to be something else.
100%. Also, like, from the beginning of time, what has driven us to learn has never, ever changed. Like, we're fueled by curiosity. We love the aha moments. We like trial and error. We want to innovate, and we learn best by making mistakes and with other people. That has never changed. But unfortunately, in our pursuit to, again, like, increased knowledge through technology, we stripped a lot of that out. And not because we didn't think it was important, we really didn't have the tools to do it before. Now we absolutely do. So making sure that we're building that in from the beginning, I think, is one of the most foundational steps that we can take in this next evolution of the technology and learning.
I've been really inspired lately by some of the AI NPCs being built by community members and how that helps to fuel a closer sense of belongingship and membership. One NPC that I've been thinking about a lot is the XR Women NPC created by Karen Alexander at XR Women. She created Margie Purple, which is a NPC that welcomes and informs and not only answers questions about the members or the history of XR Women, but also kind of creates a sense of belonging. And then Tink's Playground has been here in the audience has been the lead artist for the Choral Collective. And together we've been creating like these NPCs that represent different chorals. And so the choral personalities or influencers are connecting in different ways with the audience, but they have different messages and they represent, just like baseball cards have different stats, these NPCs have different ways of creating relationships with the visitors or players or participants. And some of these examples are creating a deeper sense of belonging. And I think that humans need that sense of togetherness, as you were talking about, to really feel and believe with that sense of community that they're invincible, that they're not alone, that they don't have to face anything on their own. So often, I mean, even like a simple, like messenger chat AI has, that was developed for the Women in Horizon group, has communicated with different members, and through listening and being perceptive has helped shift the mental health of some of our members in meaningful, lasting ways. And I don't know if that could happen just in silos. So like this idea of togetherness, these social experiences that bring us together and make us feel like that feeling of somebody patting you on the back and saying everything's going to be okay.
Just put the controller on your back.
Yes, I think that ultimately, and we don't need the niceties, because I think that I wrote an email or sent a proposal that wasn't on the mark, and I got so angry at my chat GPT. I was like, how dare you? How can I trust you? Right? Did I do this right or did I do this wrong? And I don't want it just to give me platitudes. I need constructive criticism to be my best self. And that can't happen alone. But when you're engaging in these socially embedded experiences, you're able to trust more because you can see that you're not alone within this.
That makes me think about this other question that I wanted to ask you, Monica, which is about, you're talking, we've talked about modeling behavior, about giving people agency, about making them feel welcome in space, about meeting their expectations for when they first go into a space, regardless of whether they're looking like a watermelon or, a question mark. But you also, you talked a little bit about what happens when we have AI NPCs not as teachers, but as co-thinkers. And I think that's really an interesting next step. Would love to hear you talk a little bit more about that.
No, I love the idea of co-intelligence, right? Because that really is more naturally how we learn. We've, for now decades, just been like, everything in learning is memorized, it's right or wrong, it's multiple choice. That's actually a terrible way to do it. That was just sort of the fastest, easiest way. And you've probably looked at some of the concerns coming out is, oh my gosh, people are going to use AI to cheat. They are. Like, let's face it, everyone's using AI to cheat and to find the answers because our current system actually lends itself very well to just using it to cheat and find the answers. But the students who are doing that, copying, pasting it into ChatGPT, getting the answers, putting it back, yeah, they'll get 100 on the homework, but when it comes to actually showing mastery of those topics, they can't. They haven't actually learned anything. But those that are using it as co-intelligence to brainstorm different scenarios, to try out different things, to really talk to it back and forth, maybe they don't get 100 on the homework, but they have fundamentally figured out how to start to understand these ideas on a deeper level. And so our current measures of mastery are obsolete. We need to just recognize that our current system probably is no longer fit for purpose. But if we can start to think about a co-intelligence with this technology, it becomes a partnership that not only pushes us to think bigger, solve problems better. The limitations of our own brain are, we can only think at a certain speed and we can only remember a certain amount of information. So we're still using AI oftentimes to find how to get a skill or how to find the right content to learn. But eventually our own AI is going to actually possess a lot of those skills and have that intelligence inside them. So we have to start to learn how to partner with it. And that's where I think things are going to get interesting, because it'll allow us to think more of the innovation and the brainstorming and pushing boundaries, not so much the very technical skills that we've been kind of limited by in our current way of learning. So I think it's going to unlock just a huge next generation of this partnership and co-intelligence with our AI to form new solutions. We're seeing it a little bit in climate, right? Like that triad of humans and AI and machine, figuring out a whole lot of different patterns that we couldn't see in the medical industry, detecting cancers better. So it's like there's something about that combination that I think is going to unlock and push us to go even further. And the other really interesting thing is our technology is going to get smaller and smaller. So we're still bound a little bit by a headset or a rectangle in our hand. And as all of that starts to become smaller and starts to allow us to learn kind of in context, right, where AI becomes spatial and it can see where we are, it will suddenly start to offer that lifelong learning, those tidbits, that curiosity continuously within our environments, no matter what we're doing. And I think that's going to be, again, you'll always have that expert with you, right next to you, in any kind of context. So we're seeing it slowly with AI can now read your screen and be the little bot on the side, so it can both analyze what you're doing but also offer help if you want. And I think we're going to start to see that through our technology as it gets smaller and smaller, suddenly become ubiquitous, and learning will continuously be part of our lives and interactions.
So, we had a few conversations in the last, couple months or so, and developed just tons and tons and tons of notes and put a lot of questions together. And then we fed it into ChatGPT, or I don't know if it's ChatGPT, but into an AI agent, into an AI, and came back with lots of questions. And one of them I really liked, across technical, emotional, and social dimensions, how do we know when an AI NPC experience works? So I'd love to hear what y'all have to say about that.
I have hot takes, but
Yeah.
I'll go first. For anyone who's played Skyrim, because I have, games, one of the things that you can do with shopkeepers, which is a very established thing of that dynamic between a person and something they're buying, you can stop them from noticing you're trying to steal something by putting a cauldron on their head. Blocks the line of sight. And that character will stand there with a cauldron on their head while you steal everything in that shop.
Wish that worked in real life.
I know. Well,
Pro tip.
that's a violation. That's a failure of that NPC. It's hilarious. People love it. But to me, it's the antithesis of this. It is when we create an AI NPC that you try to trick, you try to work with, but it works well within its bounds and it calls you out, is, I think, a very important thing to include. It is also an AI NPC that acknowledges what it is. It believes in its world, and it wants you to believe in its world, and you believe in it. But you can also clearly separate that this is not another person. It's not also a tool. It is an agent in the more logistical sense. It is an intelligence on its own, and that we acknowledge that separation.
Yeah.
That's at the very high level. I'm going to stop there. But
I think for me, it's that, we used to do AI with branching narrative. It was like, here's your choose your own adventure story. And you very quickly knew that you had like 3 rails you might be placed on. And you kind of shut down. You're like, that's not very authentic. We now have the capability of making these very authentic experiences. But I think for me, success is when that system, right, like the agentic system plus the verified knowledge that's behind it is valid, it's true, it's hopefully not biased, although that's a very hard thing to do. But when the learner can continue to work with the system and both of you grow and become more intelligent, right? Mm-hmm. It's not something that's on rails with a finite amount of like yes or no's that you're kind of going through, but you feel like there's an evolution between these agentic experiences and these environments and you, and so that you can continue to rely on it and push boundaries together with it. So that's the hope.
With context. I forgot the big part. AR and VR is all about context.
Yeah,
Humans
context.
use it. Please, Eugy, take it away with context. Anyway.
I think success looks like different things every different day, and maybe even changes hourly. Success, it could mean that now you're free to like run around naked in your garden and paint more, right? As a human, maybe you're no longer doing all kinds of needless tasks, right? So you're freed up to be maybe your most authentic self, whatever that looks like for you. Also, sometimes success looks like like getting that job interview, right? Because of that really great proposal and follow-up that you did. Sometimes success looks like realizing that you couldn't have even thought of such a brilliant idea without the code dialogue that you've been creating all along. And now you're putting together different things like coral and dating, or it's like chocolate and peanut butter, like whatever your ingredients are, all of a sudden you're mixing magic, right? And something is simmering. And I think that like this happens in hundreds of different ways through the day, right? Where I can stay focused and present with you in the moment, but on the side, I've already sent all this business and emails and directions, and now I can just be together, present with you, right? I think that's what success looks like. I don't know if I have a job. I don't know if this or that, but things are feeling aligned, right?
Yeah, really great points. It also made me think a lot about the classic research that's been done on how we present ourselves online. We're not always our exact selves online. I might be I don't want to give an example in case it's like offensive or it's someone's actual life. But you might present yourself very different, but that doesn't make it any less or more true than, or it makes you question what truth really means in these online spaces. So I think transparency is a really important part, because should these agents have transparency in who they are or what they represent? Because you go to these spaces and you have these expectations, but they might not actually be a true reflection of what things are. So yeah, it raises a good point about what truth is in relation to success.
Mm-hmm. That brings us back to where we started, really, which is, how do we learn to trust the behavior that's happening in these immersive spaces? And I don't think that we've necessarily given you any answers. I can't give you a nice, neat wrap-up. All you need is this ingredient, and this ingredient. But hopefully we've given you things to think about and more questions to ask. And some of us will be around afterwards if you want to do that. I'm sorry we didn't have time. We only have 20, 19, 8, 16 seconds left.
This timer's very obnoxious. So thank you all for coming.
Thank you so much for coming. Thank you.